Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Charles Goyette. For those of you that aren't from around here or haven't been around here for a long time, I had at one time a blossoming talk show career. And I've been doing it since I was a teenager, which, you know, is to steal a line from, I think it was Don Boudreau yesterday, was, 10 years ago. And after a long and very successful career, it kind of got nipped when President Bush decided that he wanted to invade Iraq. And it was a very difficult period for me because, well, it wasn't the fact that, my radio career was cut short that was the hard part, or that it cut severely into my income, even though I had 2 kids to put through college. It wasn't any of that so much as it was, well, it wasn't, you know what else it was? It wasn't even, I had friends call me up in the morning when I'm sound asleep saying, turn on the radio, Howard Stern's talking about you again. It wasn't even that, it wasn't all of that. The really bad part, I think, were the death threats. And the death threats were so voluminous, I had so many of these things, that I created a separate file for them. And I figured, at least when they get me, the authorities will have, some way to start figuring out who it was. But there were too many, I think, to ever narrow it down. So that was a very lonely and dark time for me. Those of you that are my age, and I see there are only like 2 in here that old, but it reminds me of my friend Ernie Kilgore in college, who one day said, the Beatles album Abbey Road kept me alive when I was a sophomore in college. And I thought, that's very profound. This is the album, this is the music, like Dark Side of the Moon kept me alive when I was a sophomore in college. So Antiwar.com kept me alive during that whole period. It was a very lonely time. I had friends, or I thought they were friends, that would see me coming in the hallway at work at the radio station and would kind of like duck out of the way. I had people who would call me at night at home and say, that thing I said to you about kind of agreeing with you about the war, don't tell anybody that because nobody knows I think that. It was just a time of kind of insanity, of war fever. But Antiwar.com kept me alive during that period. And there were a few other places that were helping. LouRockwell.com was a wonderful resource at the same time. But Antiwar.com was so important to me. And so I took the battle to the enemy as long as I had a microphone. And every day I'd go I'd go replenish the ammunition belt at Antiwar.com. What a great resource, and it remains one of the finest resources available to us all today, Antiwar.com. So I'm greatly starstruck by these people and the work that they do. And a few years ago, I met a guy by the name of Scott Horton who hooked up with Antiwar.com and started Antiwar Radio. Now, Scott was just a skater and a pirate radio guy out of Austin, Texas, on KAOS radio, if you can imagine, just a pirate radio guy. And he started doing shows for Antiwar.com, and before long it was Antiwar Radio on Antiwar.com, and he was the main guy, the anchor guy, the heavyweight. And then I'd do shows when I did find a footing on kind of a second-tier sort of run of radio stations here in Phoenix. I'd start contributing. Ernie had cut up my shows at the end of the program. We'd cut them up, we'd send them off to Antiwar.com, and so I got to supplement some of Scott's works at Antiwar Radio at Antiwar.com. Anyway, it was wonderful to meet Scott Horton and to listen to his shows. And then 2 years ago, he decided to move from KAOS Radio and from skating from Austin, Texas, and take it to the big city. And he moved to Los Angeles, and he has done wonderful things since then. He's no longer a pirate radio guy. He's known all over for his work at Antiwar Radio at Antiwar.com, and now he's on a kind of a very odd radio, kind of a left commie socialist radio station in LA. He's doing, he's inseminated himself into this thing called KPFK in Los Angeles, and taking the message to the left wing. And he's just done wonderful work, and he's so smart. Oh my gosh, pirate radio guy, skater from Austin. And he's so smart, it's scary. And when he moved to LA, he came by the house and he brought his one-eyed cat, and the one-eyed cat got lost. We're spending all evening trying to find the one-eyed cat. But in between looking for them, we have conversation, and I'm thinking, how can this guy be so smart? He's so smart. Anyway, Scott is here. His girlfriend, Larissa Alexandrovna, is here as well. I hope you get a chance to say hi to her. Larissa is highly accomplished in her own right as a poetess, but is a contributor as well to an important website, rawstory.com, and I've had her on the show many times. She's broken important world-shaking news, for example, about the Joseph Wilson-Valerie Plame story, and it was always a great pleasure to have her on. I'm so glad that she came to Phoenix to be with us this weekend as well. But I want you to welcome my friend, and when you get done here today, you'll go home and you want to look up Scott Horton on YouTube and watch him debating. He's a skater, right? From Austin, KAOS Radio, pirate radio guy, and watch him debating like ambassadors and stuff, and just like chews them up and spits them out. Scott Horton.
I better fix this. Thanks very much, Charles. At Antiwar Radio, still says Antiwar Radio with Scott Horton and Charles Goyette, even though he's been off the air for a couple years now. It's only because he's writing books temporarily until he's back on the air and back with us at antiwar.com. Thanks for that great introduction. Thanks to Ernie and everybody for having me here today. The subject is the case against the case for war with Iran. And I'm going to do my best to debunk every lie that might lead you to believe that such a thing could be necessary or legitimate. But first, I wanted to, mention WikiLeaks and the responsibility of all journalists or activists of any kind in this country, anyone who believes in human rights, to support WikiLeaks and their journalism. Sorry, old Charles got me a little choked up there. Yeah, Ron Paul says that truth is treason in the empire of lies. And I say that you don't owe empire any allegiance whatsoever. And organizations like WikiLeaks are doing what the American media won't do to bring us the truth. And you can tell they're doing a good job by how much everyone in the media, never even mind government employees, hate their guts for showing them up and doing what they have been letting us down in their responsibility in doing this whole time. So, and the new website is wikileaks.ch. That's, I think, the Swiss domain now, because the DNS got redirected and you can't get there from wikileaks.org anymore. Just like they are no longer hosted on Amazon servers. The war against them continues. So look them up at wikileaks.ch to get the Afghan and Iraq war logs and also the State Department data dump. All right, so part of what came out in the WikiLeaks were internal deliberations inside the State Department and with other governments about Iran, and a lot of those have got some headlines. And although I think we'll get to the particulars of those WikiLeaks and what they have to do with the whole story as we go through here. But I guess it's worthy to note that the biggest story that come out of WikiLeaks, other than Julian Assange is a terrible, terrible guy, was that North Korea sold some missiles to the Iranians, some new, bigger, better intercontinental missiles. And this was the headline in the New York Times under the name David Sanger, and was repeated throughout the American media anyway, all over the world. And within days, of course, and the New York Times, when they posted it, at White House request, they did not publish the document for you to go and see for yourself. Well, it was still available at wikileaks.org at the time, so some other journalists went to go and see what this memo really said. And what it said was that the Americans had asserted that these missiles existed to the Russians, and the Russians said, we don't have any reason to believe that whatsoever. And the Americans didn't even say, no, really, trust us, we have good intelligence on this. They simply said, oh, okay, and that was it. They've never been tested. They've never been proven to exist anywhere, these missiles. And I think it was Mark Twain, although actually it was someone before Mark Twain, but then Mark Twain gets the credit, said that a lie can get all the way around the world before the truth can get its boots on. And so people believe that this is just another piece of evidence of the terrible Iranian juggernaut headed our way and their ability to bomb our allies throughout the old world, etc. And yet then Gareth Porter and Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and then the next day Walter Pincus in the Washington Post and 4 or 5 others just completely came out and thoroughly demolished David Sanger's reporting. In fact, Sanger's oftentimes writing partner, William J. Broad, co-wrote a piece with another Times reporter named Mark Mazzetti, then 2 days later, repudiating their original story and explaining that actually there's really not much to this. But the important part of this story, I'm sorry to go on so long just about this one part, but the important part is how powerful this is in the narrative, right? North Korea, we all know they have missiles, right? And we heard that they sold them to Iran, and it was in the WikiLeaks, and so we know, and Iran's got these missiles now, and that's what sticks. Not that it turns out it wasn't true. But the scary assertion in the first place is what people remember. So, and that goes to the larger question of the role of the media in going along with the established narrative. But before we get back into missiles and nuclear weapons and these things, I wanted to address the motive for even the threat of war with Iran. And I think that the answer really is that the threat for war with Iran originates in Tel Aviv. And the Likud party government, formerly of Ariel Sharon, and then the Kadima party under Ehud Olmert, and now the Likud again under Benjamin Netanyahu, they are absolutely paranoid to death about Iranian nuclear technology. And they assume that if the Iranians have nuclear technology at all, then that is, in their words, tantamount to them having actual deliverable nuclear weapons, when of course that's just not true. And their lobby and their neoconservative allies in America make war with Iran their highest priority, and they have ever since September 11th. Saddam Hussein was first on George Bush and Dick Cheney's hit list, but Ariel Sharon wanted to go after Iran, and he pushed and he pushed, and he eventually basically made a deal with the Bush regime that we will help you lie the people of America into war with Iraq if you promise us that you'll hit Iran next. Thank goodness so far that promise has not been kept, but that was the deal that they struck. And some of you may have heard of the secret meetings in Rome in December of 2001, just after September 11th, when Michael Ledeen and the top Iran expert at the Pentagon, Larry Franklin, who turned out to be an Israeli spy, met with Iranian arms dealer Mansour Ghorbanifar and some Iraqi exiles and so forth. And their priority at these meetings in Rome, and with Italian intelligence as well, was to come up with lies to get us into war with Iran. That was their first priority, and it has stayed that way. There's also an American component to this that is based on what some perceive to be American national interests, and that would be, you know, the people in the State Department and the Pentagon, and the people who run the American empire, who will not forgive Iran for declaring independence from the United States in 1979. Just like Cuba is still under complete embargo, 90 miles from our shore, 20 years, a generation after the fall of the Soviet Union, we will never forgive Cuba for declaring independence. The American empire did business with communists all over the world throughout the whole Cold War. It's not communism they have a problem with, it's Castro and his intransigence. And so they will be made an example of, and so will the Iranians. And of course, by declaring their independence in 1979, I'm referring to their revolution that overthrew the government of the fascist dictator, the Shah Reza Pahlavi, who'd been installed by the United States in a coup d'etat in 1953. And back in '79, someone asked President Jimmy Carter, well, but, you know, isn't this kind of the natural result of doing this coup d'etat, and now this is the counter-reaction to that? And Jimmy Carter said, oh, well, that coup in '53, that was ancient history. But in fact, it had only been 26 years. So if we go back 26 years, Ronald Reagan was our president. If the Iranians had done a coup d'etat and overthrown Ronald Reagan and installed an Ayatollah in charge of our country, who skinned people alive, would we be over it by now and consider that ancient history by now, or would we just be biding our time? And of course, one thing that came out in the State Department WikiLeaks is some older documents that verify information that has already been published, that in fact in '79 the State Department and the CIA said, oh, the Ayatollah Khomeini, he's okay. Go ahead and tell the French, put him on a plane and send him on to Iran. It's all right. He's an old friend of ours. He helped with the coup against Mossadegh in 1953. So we're not worried about him. We can deal with him. And then, of course, later came the hostage crisis and the unforgivable Declaration of Independence. And so that's really when you hear Hillary Clinton or Condoleezza Rice before her refer to Iran as a threat, what they mean is they have the ability to maintain their independence from us, at least for now. We can't find a way to take it from them. That's what a threat is to the American empire. That's really the motive behind this. There is no actual threat to you. And of course, they try to portray Iran mostly as a nuclear threat.